Hello and welcome to episode 48 of our SAP on Azure video podcast. Today is July 2nd, and together with Goran and Robert, we're here to talk about anything related to SAP and Microsoft. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Hello.
So in one of our previous episodes, we had talked about how you can expose SAP Fiori applications to the internet, obviously, when you run your SAP system on Azure, how you can protect this via web application firewall. And today we have Martin Pankraz and Christof
Claessens, yes.
Claessens. Oh, I'm sorry for butchering your name. Joining us to talk about Azure webhooks and how you can workbooks, and how you can triage SAP specific violations in the web application firewall. But before we go there, let's actually quickly take a look at some of the news from this week. And actually, we do have a lot, but hopefully we can quickly run through this. And as always, the links are in the show notes, and then you can also spend some time on this afterwards. So in the tradition of Microsoft Digital, or the Microsoft IT team at Microsoft that really runs our services, as you know, they're regularly publishing reports, what they're doing internally, and now they released another very interesting blog post that talks about anomaly detection in the SAP environments. So basically, and we were just taking a closer look at or discussing about this before hitting record for our session here. What they've done is from the SAP systems, they're using application insights to collect the data from the SAP systems, and then they're using Azure Cognitive Services to run and detect certain anomalies. So basically, if you look then at the incoming data, you can see obviously certain patterns. What is happening regularly when, I don't know, when there's a weekend or weekdays, obviously, and then out of this you can detect certain spikes, certain anomalies. And in this article, they talk about how they're using it to detect such anomalies in their SAP environments. So from my point of view, again, a really interesting article that shows how Microsoft is actually running and operating SAP. Next thing is something about connectivity to cloud services, hyperscalers. Obviously, with the rise with SAP, Microsoft is really embracing the cloud providers even further, I would say. And now in this blog post, Jana talks about the different ways how you can connect to these hyperscalers environments. So from an Azure point of view, obviously, we have ExpressRoute that is typically used for customers that run their SAP system on Azure. But then it's getting more and more interesting when you're, for example, using also services on the business technology platform. How do you connect to the business technology platform in a secure way? And there are obviously ways to do this, but it's getting even more interesting than if you have a scenario where, for example, you're running your SAP system on Azure and you're running the business technology platform on Azure. And what we just released with SAP is a private. Sorry, here we go. A private link connectivity. And actually, in order to take a closer look at this, let's take a look at a blog post from Philip Becker. So in the last few months, myself and quite a lot of other colleagues have been working very, very closely with SAP to get this service started. Because one feedback that we got from customers is really, I have my SAP system running on Azure. I have the business technology platform on Azure. Isn't there a good way to connect these two services together? Obviously, if everything is running in your own subscription, there are multiple ways how you can do this. You can do VNet peering and stuff like that. But with this PaaS service from business technology platform that is running in SAP's Azure subscription, there are a few other pitfalls or challenges, I would say, how to do this. And what we have been working now together with SAP is to use the Azure Private Link Service to exactly make this connection happening, so that you don't even need to use an SAP Cloud Connector potentially that you need to manage, that you need to maintain, but you could potentially then really have your SAP system running here in your Azure subscription, running your S/4HANA system, and now you can create a private link endpoint to the business technology platform, so that from the business technology platform, for example, you could create a Fiori application that then connects to your SAP system without the need to open any ports in your VNet where your SAP system is running. So I think this is a really interesting scenario. It's currently in beta. It's currently obviously only available on Azure. So it's a really beautiful scenario. And actually, there's already quite a lot of documentation out there. There's the official documentation on the help portal that gets you started, explains a little how this works. There's also a nice tutorial already available on the developers.sap.com. And I know that Martin Pankraz is again already working on a fantastic blog post that also outlines the setup, the configuration, the usage of a cloud application library, cloud application programming model scenario there. So I'm really looking forward. No pressure, Martin, on this that you publish it, but again, I think this is something really important, something really critical, something that a lot of customers that I've been talking to have been waiting for. So I'm really excited about this beta release yet. Good, then going on, something that was announced, I think at TechEd, and then it was reaffirmed at Sapphire, is now live. So as of yesterday, July 1st, there's a free tier available for the business technology platform. So just to put this into perspective, there's the trial environment. And personally, I think I'm extremely happy with the trial environment, but there's some issues with that you need to renew it every 30 days, and it's valid only for 365 days. But now there's a free tier really available for BTP. So if you are a customer, they do this in certain waves. And in the first wave, you need to be an SAP customer, you need to have an S user. Then you can enable these free tier services that are available. And then you can run them really in your sub account that you have on BTP, and use these services for free. So I think that's also a really nice step. And obviously the huge advantage with this model compared to the trial environment is that you do this in your real environment, in your productive account or in your productive BTP account, so not in your trial account. And if you develop there something and you like it and it's evolving, then you can just switch from the free tier model to a really productive model. And you don't need to recreate everything like what you need to do right now when switching from the trial environment to the real environment. Okay, quickly going on, the business application, the API Business Hub has a new layout, some new functionalities. I like the new look and feel. If you don't, you can still switch back, but from a functionality, if you look for a purchase order or something like that, then you find now the APIs. I mean, similar things were also obviously possible before, but it's a cleaner UI, I would say. You get all the information. You can take a look at the API reference. You can download the schemas and stuff like that. You can test the scenarios. So, for example, here there's the purchase order API call. I could add sample values, and then I should be able to also execute and test this purchase order. So it's a nice improvement, I would say, of the API Business Hub. Okay, I'm trying to speed up and not to lose too much time, or to give keep a lot of time for Martin and Christof. So here we have just this morning, DJ Adams talked about the SAP Graph. So we talked about some new blog posts that were released in the previous weeks, and now DJ is looking at these blog posts basically and talking about what is the SAP Graph. And this is just the first of his hands-on sessions that he has there. Apparently there will be additional ones where he talks into more detail about the SAP Graph. But if you want to learn about it, I think that's a really nice starting point to get an overview.
And we have integration scenarios from Roman for this, right? Where we have SAP and Microsoft Graph together.
Good point. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Roman Broch, he has some GitHub repositories. I think we also talked about them at some point in time, where he is leveraging the SAP Graph, where he's leveraging the Microsoft Graph, bringing everything together. I think in a Teams integration. So yeah, definitely a nice scenario and good to learn and use the SAP Graph. Good. The next thing are two blog posts that Goran, you just brought up. So maybe you can quickly.
So maybe the overall problematic is many customers will implement disaster recovery across the regions, Azure regions, right? And that's a great stuff. And they are looking for, now, generally speaking, the challenging part is how to replicate, especially the SAP MNT files and SAP Central Services files. And here we talk about Linux. Now here we have an old blog, which were previous blog from Ralica, talking about coming Azure file for NFS across the zones. But then she would say, okay, yes, you have a zonal redundancy there, but you don't have ability to synchronize, to implement with this solution as it is disaster recovery. And then she would recommend, for example, use for the cross-region replication, if you would just highlight that line, Holger, exactly. So how to implement cross-region, rsync as an example. rsync is a built-in program, command line tool in Linux. And she would talk about how about the ANF. Okay, you can do it as long as it is a kind of peered, they have a peered region right between the ANF. But if you sometimes need to also replicate, you have an ANF, but they are not peered between the two regions, then you can use also as an example an rsync as a built-in tool. Now, basically it boils down to the new, so that's the old blog. If you go now to the actual blog published by my colleague Ross, so he's talking how to use this and how to set up the rsync tool basically for this purpose, and it goes quite into the details. Okay, he gives an example here as an ANF, but again it could be anything else. ANF definitely makes sense if they are not peered, right? And actually it could be used for anything. So again, I would say very, very practical stuff. I mean, it's a Linux, so you have to the manual stuff there. I need to be mean here a little bit, but anyway.
You mean compared to Windows?
Yes, of course. Yeah, so let's go on. But it's very, very useful stuff. Definitely many customers are running on Linux. Many customers are implementing DR. Easy way to do it, handling, understanding by yourself what you are doing, right? Okay.
Oh, great. So that's actually a nice segue. So here you have to write code, and that's a beautiful segue to the Power Platform, the low code, no code. And actually, there's a nice new cloud skill challenge, Power Platform Fundamentals, where they have like I don't know how many 30 exercises or something like that you can go through. And that help you get started with the Power Platform. So it talks really about Power Apps, Power Automate, Power BI, and it really guides you through. I looked at the first few sessions, how first of all introducing what it is, but then also really let's start a very simple Power App. Let's do the first simple Power Automate flow and so on. So if you have not done, if you have not looked yet into Power Platform, I think that's a great way to get started. If you don't want to read so much, there are also some really amazing videos by Apostolis that talk about how to use Power Platform in the combination with SAP. So this cloud skill challenge is just Power Platform without a very concrete SAP context. But here, Apostolis really goes deep into what options do we have to connect the Power Platform to an SAP system? And he talks really about the ERP connector, about using OData as an endpoint, and then spending quite some time also on the RPA solution, so really robotic process automations, how you can use the Power Automate desktop to control your SAP GUI, to control web-based applications. So it's really a very extensive, very well done video series. So yeah, there's a full playlist there. So this is really something that I think where Apostolos spend a lot of time to make this work, and it clearly shows. It's really very well done and explains the whole setup in a very nice way. Then the next thing that I want to highlight, and I think that really differentiates the Power Platform from other low-code, no-code solutions, that this combination, this fusion of teams, as Microsoft is calling it, that different personas can work with the Power Platform. And in this blog post here, Julie Strauss talks about additional security functionalities, additional management monitoring solutions, because obviously there's often a risk or a concern by the IT now if we allow our businesses to use Power Platform or low-code tools. And Microsoft is really investing a lot in making sure that even though you rolled it out, that you have still control, that you can check how authentications to the different services look like. You can use these data loss prevention policies to really block certain accesses to certain services. So there's a lot of new information, a lot of new tooling coming, management functionalities coming to really help you control the usage of the Power Platform in your environment. Another topic there that is really important is GitHub, and it sounds maybe very contrary to the low-code approach from Power Platform, but this, from my point of view, really is one of the key strengths of the Power Platform. That yes, you can do low-code, no-code, but at the same time you can integrate this into, for example, existing CI/CD pipelines. And here now the integration into GitHub Actions is generally available. So you can really now use the CLIs, the command line interfaces that allow you to control certain aspects of the Power Platform in your GitHub Actions pipeline. So it's a really beautiful way, again, to show this fusion of teams, of addressing the low-code developer, the business user, the citizen user, with the more professional, hardcore developer that is using GitHub, that is using CI/CD pipelines. So a last thing that I quickly want to mention, and that was really absolutely amazing to me, is the release of the GitHub Copilot. And unfortunately, I've not yet been able to test it myself. But if you look at some of the feedback on Twitter or on other social medias where folks that actually already have access to it, and they show what you can do with it, and not only these pre-canned demos where everyone knows, of course it's working. If I do a days between dates, and then I mean, it's working obviously because this is a demo here. But if you look at what others are doing with this is really, really amazing. So you just start writing that you want to create a function that is called calculate days between dates, and then from JavaScript, Copilot automatically not only suggests like a text or something like that, but really the full code snippet. And now, I mean, obviously here we're talking about SAP and Microsoft. Now just think of this, what you could do in the context of creating an SAP Fiori application, using this in CAP, using this with SAP UI5, or potentially even using this writing ABAP code. So as we've talked about, I think in the past, Visual Studio Code already has some unofficial plugins to connect to your ABAP system, using ADT to connect and retrieve your classes there. Now just think of this, if you could enrich this also for writing ABAP code. So I think this is really something that I'm super excited about. I have signed up to try to get into the Copilot program, and as soon as I get access, we'll definitely talk about this further, I would say.
I'm waiting for the Copilot then make comments about my coding style, like, I wouldn't do it like this. Is this really the name you want to give that variable?
Yeah, or just think about this, Martin. What additional beautiful programs you could release with the help of Copilot. Your blocks, even though they are already amazing, they'll get maybe even better or faster out. Good, but with this,
yeah.
But you know that problem is always in front of computer, not inside the computer.
Often.
Okay, but now let's switch over to our experts, I would say. There was a blog post by Dennis. I just see in December that talked about having an SAP Fiori app and exposing this via the web application firewall to the internet. And I think with this, obviously, there are some challenges or also opportunities. And I think, Martin, Christof, you have done some additional work on that. So without further ado, maybe you can quickly introduce yourself and then talk a little about what you have done and show us.
Yeah, feel free to go first, Christof.
Yeah, maybe introduce the new face here first. So my name is Christof Claessens. I work as an engineer within the Fast Track for Azure team. Fast Track for Azure being a customer success program. We work with customers to onboard them onto Azure. And my work predominantly resides on the app dev side of Azure. And yeah, one of the things I'm doing is identity. The other thing that I tend to do fairly a lot of is application gateway. And as such, the conversation with Martin started on, hey, I have an SAP environment that I want to expose to application gateway. At some point, this starts lighting up like a Christmas tree. What can we do? And that's where the entire conversation started, basically.
It's very, very good introduction already, Christof. Yeah, I recently changed roles. I was part of the same team or the same organization as Christof. Now I'm part of the same organization as Holger, focusing more on the integrational aspects now full-time. And today I'm going to give a quick introduction on the architecture before Christof leads us through the Azure Workbook on the web application firewall. So Holger, you want to quickly bring back the picture from Dennis Padia, or should I?
I can also do this. Just share my screen again. Almost there. Here we go.
Then scroll down to the picture. So like you said, many customers develop the need to expose some SAP functionality also over the internet. Yeah, may it be a home office, may it be private like devices that you want to use. I used to always tell the example of the CIO who's in the Caribbean using his iPad and he needs access to some of the Fiori apps. And he doesn't have the VPN, he doesn't have any corporate connections. And we need a secure way of allowing access to our SAP systems anyways. Yeah. And typical
it's
example,
a great scenario, you know, by the way.
Yeah,
in the
like
Caribbean.
From a Caribbean.
Nowadays it's maybe Bavarian forest, but it's also nice. And the application gateway is one of the options that's also managed component on Azure to allow that, to give a specific entry point into your private environment. And the web application firewall plays a central role in being able to monitor what kind of requests you get and also prevent malicious access. Yeah? And Dennis really describes this in detail, how to set this up and what components are involved, the challenges, and to give you a good perspective on the concept. And today with Christof, we are going to specifically focus on the web application firewall. And you see there's this orange arrow from the intranet. Yeah, so going to the web dispatcher into the Fiori system. And when I tested this internally, so I had no issues. Yeah, I could see the app, it was showing up correctly, it was working. And then we switched off to the internet, and opened the same app, and nothing worked anymore. Yeah, because the first time when you didn't train your web application firewall at all, it's going to be annoyed on a couple of things, that SAP configured. So maybe let's use that as the jump over to you, Christof.
Yeah.
Because
should we have a look together and see how that environment looks like?
Yes.
So let me share my primary screen here. Juggling some screens.
Yep.
Is that showing up?
Yes.
Yeah. Good.
All right. Awesome. Now I lost my Teams window, obviously. All right. Cool. So I think, Martin, you were specifically talking about the maintain business partner application. So let's go there.
It's rather disturbing if you can't maintain any business partners anymore.
I'm not an SAP expert, but I can have a mental picture there as well. Yes, indeed. So something is showing up at least, but I assume this is not entirely correct, right? Because I see things missing. Are these supposed to be buttons?
Yeah, they're supposed to be buttons.
Okay, so probably it's like CSS file missing or some images missing. So clearly something is wrong. So the first place where I would start looking is in my developer tools. Okay, so the developer tools part of your browser, it doesn't get any simpler than that. So let's look at any errors that we see here. Let me clear this out and I'll refresh my window.
But for a Christmas tree, we need other colors than red, I think. Yeah.
Yes, hopefully. So let's see what we end up with. So I see some get failures to CSS. So that's a clue here. Mm-hmm. What's the other thing I'm seeing? Yeah, that's predominantly what. Well, there's a fav icon missing as well, and then a post statement to some OData query that is failing apparently. So let's have a look at that later on as well.
Oh, that's going to be really bad. If OData queries are failing, then probably all of them are failing. Yeah. So.
Okay. So yeah, let's revisit that then later. Should we try get the buttons first? Focus on that. Okay. So so clearly the CSS was failing. So it's a clue. So let's have a look together if that's indeed our issue. So where do we start, right? Application Gateway, when you implement it, can be configured to do logging against log analytics. And pretty much that is what you should do, because if you don't, either for the access logs as well as for the firewall logs, you're pretty much blind. You don't know effectively what is happening inside of the Application Gateway. So this has been already configured in this environment. So let's go to log analytics and try to find out exactly with that CSS file what is going on here. Okay.
And is there any time limitation for the trace? Can I trace next 2 hours, or there's a predefined time?
Log analytics would keep it as long as you configure log analytics.
90 days. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
To retain it by default, 90 days, I believe. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So let's go to our log analytics environment. So here we have our application gateway. We can configure the diagnostic settings here to do logging to log analytics. That's something we've already done here. And then if we go to log analytics itself, we can go to the logs and we can start inspecting what effectively happens. All of the logging for application gateway is in Azure Diagnostics. And if we look at Azure Diagnostics as is, we'll find a lot of data.
So here, basically, everything from the web application firewall is traced, is logged, and you just have now full access to the logs, and you see everything, I guess.
Yes.
Also, maybe information traces, but warnings and errors and stuff like that, everything is there.
All of that across two big categories. So you have the access log, pretty much like any request that is going to application gateway can be tracked. And you have the firewall log, which gives me more details on if a request gets blocked, why exactly, which rules got triggered, and we'll get there later. Okay. The first check I want to do is in the access log, basically. So if you look at the category, we can easily filter that out. So I can say Azure Diagnostics, where category equals application gateway access log, and then I'm immediately going to filter on my CSS file. So I'm going to do where original request URI with args. I'm going to say contains, and let's search for a CSS file. Okay. So there's a lot of requests that contains our CSS file. Now, specifically, I'm looking for the one where my status is different from HTTP 200. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say where HTTP status is different from 200. So now I have all the errors. And let's just open up one and see. What does this request tell us? It's indeed library.css. I believe that was the same CSS file that we were missing in our browser, which is interesting. So this should hopefully teach us something. We need to be aware there's two HTTP statuses, right? There's the HTTP status as returned from the server to application gateway, which is server status. And then there's the HTTP status returned from application gateway to our browser, which is the HTTP status we're filtering on here. So the one we're really looking for in the backend is what did SAP return to application gateway? And that's what we call server status. So let's have a look here if we can find that back. Here, server status. This teaches me, like SAP returned a 403 to application gateway. So application gateway cannot invent the CSS files. It's just going to pass that on to the front end. And so clearly there's a misconfiguration on the SAP side, but this is not our issue for the missing icons, for sure. So we need to look further. This is not the issue. So let's go back to our SAP environment here, and let's scan our list of errors once more. Oh, here. See, there is an SVG file missing. It might be that. So let's go back to our logging environment and just change this to SVG, and all the rest is going to be the same.
Wondering how many customers will notice that they have problematic files in there when they start looking on the developer tools and the Fiori overviews.
I should have maybe tweaked the time range to be a bit shorter for this to be a bit faster.
No problem. But I was just thinking when you had the autocomplete feature to complete the original request URL with args, just think of this if we now have the Copilot functionality and you just say.
That'd be amazing. That'd be amazing indeed. Let's have a look. So is that the same thing? SAP GUI icons? SAP GUI icons.svg. Nice. So this is the one that is being missing. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to check for server status, which is from the server to application gateway. So what is server status? Oh, interestingly enough, I don't have server status. Not having server status to me means there is really no request that went from the backend even to application gateway, right? So there's a good likelihood this request got blocked by application gateway and never made it even to the SAP system. Now, if that happens, how do I know effectively why it got blocked? And that's where there's an interaction between the access logs and the web application firewall logs. So every single request has a unique transaction identifier. And that transaction identifier will be the same in the access logs for that request as it will be in the firewall logs. And for every line and entry in the access log, you'll find one or more entries if the request got blocked in the firewall log. So that'll be the next thing. Let's have a look at the actual firewall log and see what is happening there. So let's do a quick new query. Again, this comes from Azure Diagnostics. The category now will be different. So my category is going to be application gateway firewall log, like this. And then I need to filter out my entry. So let's go here. My first query. And let's have a look at that transaction identifier, if I can find it back. Where is it?
There it is.
Transaction ID _G. So I'm just going to copy that. I'm going to go where transaction ID _G equals, and now I have my GUID. And now we're going to see that for this particular error in the access log, there is 2 entries in my firewall log. So my firewall log has encountered 2 rules that are either changing the anomaly score for this request or effectively blocking the request. Okay, so there is a rule. Let's see if we can. Saying request content type is not allowed by policy, and inbound anomaly score exceeded the total score. It's important to know how those rules work. So typically, your request is being inspected by hundreds of rules. Every rule has the ability to inspect the request and say, this is not quite okay, and it's going to increase what we call the anomaly score. There's rules that you can change and say, I do not want to activate this rule, yes or no. But there's also rules you cannot change. For example, the last rule here, inbound anomaly score exceeded, is a rule that is just going to check the total anomaly score that is created by all of the other rules. And if it's above, in this case, 5, it's going to block the request. So that's a rule logically you will not want to delete and you cannot even remove. So the rule that is really of interest here is the top one. Request content type is not allowed by policy. Now, while we were investigating this in the very beginning, because obviously this is not the first time we've seen this, myself and Martin, we were really puzzled. Like, why would a PNG file or an SVG file on earth be blocked? And I think, Martin, you found on the internet that there is effectively attacks that make use of some of the properties of SVGs.
Yeah. You can just put JavaScript there, yeah? And this is basically cross-site scripting then, yeah. You can inject stuff in there in your picture, yeah. So this is a totally valid complaint.
Yeah. Now I assume that the SVGs created by SAP is something we can trust.
I hope so.
If we can all agree on that, I'm not the security expert here. I'm just teaching you how to deal with application gateway. Then for sure, we can go back in the rules configuration for application gateway and we can turn off that rule and see what changes. So let's actually go there. I'm going to go back to my application gateway here. I'm going to go to the web application firewall section. And there is a web application firewall policy associated with this entire gateway. So let me go there here. Now, what do I need to disable exactly? If I need to go to the logging, there will be a rule identifier here. And the rule identifier here is 920420. Okay, let's remember that. I go to the managed rules in my policy. And I have the memory of a goldfish. This is ridiculous. 942, I believe, was it?
And then 020.
942 0420. 942 0.
That was 920, not 94. 92.
920.
Yes.
And
420.
420.
0420. 0420 here. Request content type is not allowed by policy, and that rule is now enabled. So if we trust that the SVGs coming from our backend are going to be safe and not user generated or whatever, we can select that rule and we can say, I'm going to disable the rule. It's important to realize this is an all or nothing operation. So this applies to your entire, in this case, it's fairly evident this is probably safe. But then you might come across cases whereby you say, I want to enable this for a certain bit and not for everything else. If you disable a rule here, it's for the entire policy. So there's nothing in between there. Okay, we'll come back to that and revisit that statement later on when we talk about the OData connections. But for now, just assume if you disable a rule, it's going to be for everything. Cool. So I changed this. I can save this now. Could take a while to update the policy, but hopefully, if all of this takes effect, we should see effectively icons coming in because the icons presumably are going to be pulled from our SVG file there.
Mm-hmm. And this is now for all SVG files, right? So you disabled the policy. Could we? Is there a way to get a better or a more detailed view what this specific policy actually does? Because I think in policy name I didn't see that it was for SVG files.
I'll come back to that in a minute.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Because what we've done now is gone through the raw logs, the raw access log and the raw firewall log. But this is not if I need to go to 20 logs, let alone 50 or 100. this is quickly going to be very cumbersome. So rather than just pointing out the problem, I'm also trying to give you tools at the very end where you use to work with these things in a bit more convenient fashion. First of all, let's see if at least what we've done takes effect. So let me go back here, make a clean slate on my developer tools, and do a refresh.
Let me make it like a small drum roll.
I think it already looks different now. Not yet. Oh, here we are. Here we are.
Okay.
Perfect.
So our request is making its way through. But we're not completely out of the woods yet, because if I go up, that post statement, that OData query, which that represents, is still failing, which is a bit of an issue, right? Before we go there, you correctly pointed out that going through these logs is quite cumbersome. It takes a lot of time. It's not very convenient. Given that a lot of our customers need to go through this, and that does not only go for application gateway, most web application firewalls will need tuning. It would be rare to see you put a web application firewall in front of something and it just magically works, right? I created a workbook, an Azure workbook, that you could just go and install. So you just click deploy to Azure, you point to your log analytics workspace, and it would be associated with your log analytics workspace. That workbook should be able to help you go through all of the violations, and then for you to see exactly what is being violated and why. Okay, so I already deployed this in our environment in the interest of time. So let me go back here to log analytics, and if I go to workbooks here, let me do this. Yeah. Then I'll find a new workbook.
One click and then just a couple of entries, but done. Yeah, deploy to Azure buttons are really fast and quick.
Yeah, it should not take a lot of time. But here I have an application gateway WAF triage workbook, which is specifically designed when you did not deploy things to production yet, and you could trust the traffic. All the errors you would see typically would be things you would want to solve, because you were looking at trusted traffic, not an attacker actually going wild on your web application. So let me open up that workbook here. It takes a particular subscription, it takes a particular workspace, which is the log analytics workspace, and I can filter that down on a time window. Now, in our case, let's just look at the last maybe 30 minutes. It detects all of the application gateways in my environment. And then I only have one scope here, which is the global scope, which means the web application firewall rules that apply to the entire gateway, not just a single listener or a rule or something. Okay, so I'm going to go to the global scope here, and then I have two pivots. One way of thinking is I'm going to triage by rule. I'm going to look at all of the violations, and I'm going to order them by which rule is violated most and which rule is violated least. And I'm just going to work my way from the top to the bottom, trying to fix these things and do the most impactful ones first. That's the view you see here. So these are ordered by how many times they were violated. And you also see a little trend graph to see how that was doing over time.
Oh, that's nice, Christof. You added that recently, right? The trend graph.
Yes.
Didn't see that before.
Yeah, we've been iterating on this as I get feedback from customers. Hopefully that helps everybody out as well. The other pivot is, you know that the SVG file was missing. So let's try and look at, for that specific request, what was that request hitting? So I can select my host name here, and then I can do a quick search on the path and say, hey, is there any SVG file missing? Yes, and there's actually a GET request to an SVG file called SAP GUI icons.svg. So I can click there, and it's going to give me example requests. Remember that every single unique request gets a transaction ID. I'm going to get a list of transaction IDs that specifically were for this particular path. So I can click that transaction ID, and then I see all of the different rules that got triggered by this particular example. This is a lot easier, I think you would agree, than going to the raw logs. But nevertheless, I think it's important to understand also how the raw logs work, because there could be situations you need to go back to the raw logs. And in those cases, I can, for example, say that transaction ID, find that transaction ID back in the access log. And I can click here, and we would create the query for you immediately in Log Analytics, where you see the raw information, should the workbook not be giving you maybe all of the details that you were looking for.
That's like Christof being the co-pilot now, huh?
Yes. Oh, that's really nice. Yeah. Because especially when I saw the transaction ID, I thought, okay, now you can copy and paste it and add it into your query, but you already, it's just a click away. That's really nice.
Absolutely. So here,
Cool.
basically, that's the reason I show you before. The exact same query. I mean, you can further like change this from here, but at least you get the basic query that you would need. Okay.
Oh, very nice. Yeah.
So let me close this. A very similar view is available in a single click for the firewall logs. So you can find this in the access log and find this in the firewall log. Okay. Awesome. So that's how I would do it with the workbook instead. Hopefully that makes your life a lot easier. What is also very convenient in both views, you get links to Spider Labs. Spider Labs is the place where you would get the firewall definitions for, so the rule definitions. So in this case, I get a rule here: requested content type is not allowed by policy. I could just click here and open up the location in GitHub where the definition of that rule is being stored. Okay. The workbook would keep into account even the version of the rule set that you have deployed. Let's open up. I'm not sure what happens.
And jump to that specific line so that you don't have to scroll yourself.
Just to because I have to admit I'm not so familiar. So what you're saying, that all the rules that we saw, this list that we saw before in the portal, all these rules are maintained publicly on GitHub. So yeah. I can take a closer look at these rules here in GitHub.
Yeah, and you see the exact regular expression that is being matched.
Nice.
Very often there would be comments explaining you why something wouldn't work. Now in this case, I'm having issues with this. I'm not quite sure what's happening here.
Maybe it's blocked by your firewall.
That's the thing.
Maybe you can try to debug it. You know.
Yeah, there's something odd going on. Let me actually take another example. Maybe that works better. Yeah, recently we have been iterating a lot on the workbook, so it might be that there's quirky things still. If that happens, people can file an issue on the GitHub page, and we're more than happy to have a look. So for each one of those rules, we can have a look. For example, let's look at this rule.
And this is maintained by Microsoft.
No. This is maintained by Spider Lab, so it's an organization that a lot of firewall vendors draw their definitions from. So it's very common to use these definitions. Yeah.
Okay.
Something wrong with my browser or something? But for some reason, it does not give me the exact. Well, it just wants to open up and then suddenly it crashes.
Yeah, we
shows you quickly. It takes away from you.
I don't know.
But okay, it doesn't matter. Theoretically, you would see all the regular expression. You would then understand why your specific request was blocked.
And the most interesting bit there is the comments. So the comments would often explain why, what exactly they're trying to detect and why, which is very interesting. Cool. We still didn't fix our OData issue yet. So let's have a look here. The OData URL looked like something SAP OPU OData. So let me go to my workbook, triage by URL, SAP OPU / OData. So it looks like I'm having different kinds of URLs that were failing. I think the first containers was one I got a 4.3 on. So I have two examples here. Again, I can open those in raw logs, or I can just click a transaction ID and I would see, wow, okay. So this is not going to be as easy as the simple SVG example that we've seen before. This is literally the Christmas tree we were talking about before. There's a lot of rules here that basically think that we're trying to do SQL injection, which is not quite abnormal because if you think about what OData is doing, it's effectively mimicking a query language over a query string, right? So it does look a lot like SQL, and a lot of the keywords would be the same. So as paranoid as web application firewalls are nowadays, this is a bit of an issue, okay? And it's more of an issue because I just explained to you that if I disable a rule, the rule is disabled for the entire firewall. Now there is options to there's different angle to configuring my firewall. It would be to say a particular section of my request should not be inspected. So I can say this particular header should not be inspected, or this particular cookie should not be inspected. But in case of OData, my OData query string is going to come in over my URL. I do want my URLs to be scanned for pretty much everything. So that's not really an option here. Okay. So I'm going to show you a different way to treat these things. Specific to SAP, I think this is an approach that might make sense. Again, I'm here to explain you how application gateway works. I do want to make a big disclaimer. I'm not a security expert. Please check this with your respective security people in the company, right? That we're not here to say this is the way to do it. So keep that in mind, please. Let me go back to application gateway and have a look at how that is configured. This is my application gateway. Oh, well, that is my policy. This is my application gateway. In my application gateway, I have a listener. That listener is taking all of the traffic. I have a backend pool. That's where my SAP resides. And there's a connection between the listener and the backend pool by something which we call a rule. A rule is the glue between the listener and the backend pool. Okay. Normally, in all normal circumstances, you would just have a simple rule that takes in the request and forwards the request to my backend pool. In this case, preparing for this session, we did not create a normal rule. We created a multi-path rule. So let me show you that. So here's a rule for my Fiori, and that is a path-based rule. And a path-based rule has the special capability that depending on the path in the request, it can send something to one backend or another backend. It could be that request to /API needs to go to your Azure function or to your SAP or whatever. And it could be that the request to /images needs to go to blob storage. That's when I would use a multi-path rule so that I can split my request based on the contents of the path. However, in this case, I do not want to split, but I do want to differentiate between the traffic for OData and the traffic for all of the rest of SAP. I'm going to explain you why just in a minute. So what I'm going to do, I could not create a multi-path rule without a path. So I created a dummy path. Just ignore that for now. It was just more convenient for the demo to already have that multi-path rule provisioned. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new rule here, or a new path. And specifically, I'm going to configure that path to listen to everything /SAP /OPU /OData /star. So pretty much all of our OData traffic that hits that particular URL will be captured by this particular rule. My target name is going to be, let me call that the SAP OData endpoint, whatever I would like to. I'm going to use the very same HTTP settings as I'm using for the rest of the application gateway. HTTP settings are what you would use to define saying, I'm going to go to SAP over HTTP or over HTTPS. I'm going to use this host name. This is my probe traffic. So it's a set of configurations that apply to the communication between application gateway and the SAP backend. Okay. I'm just going to use the same HTTP settings I've been using before, and I'm going to send that to my SAP backend like this, and I'm going to save that rule. Nice. So basically, I have a default configuration which is taking all traffic, and I have a rule that takes in the traffic for my OData traffic. And both are going to be sent to the same SAP backend. So why on earth distinguish between those different paths? And the reason is I can attach a firewall policy to a specific path in a rule. Okay, and that's now it's interesting because I can have a different firewall policy altogether for all of my OData traffic versus all the rest. Because I do not want to disable inspection of SQL injection attacks on my normal SAP traffic. I only want to do that for the traffic where I think it's quite okay, the OData endpoint, which presumably is secured by SAP. Okay. So this is configured now. So let me actually go to my web application firewall policies. This is a set of policies I have in my subscription here. And I believe we have an SAP WAF policy. Okay. I created this policy upfront just to prevent having to go through the various iterations and cleaning up the entire Christmas tree. But we've seen the principle and how you could do that already, especially with the workbook, should not be too hard. To show you that, let me go to the managed rules here. And those managed rules here, it would not say enabled. So there's something special going on. And indeed, we would see that this one is disabled. And I think if we go a bit further, no.
I think it's the WAF for data that you wanted to open.
Yes, I'm sorry. Thank you for keeping me honest here. All right. SQL injection attacks. And there's a whole lot of them disabled. Yeah. The ones that we know are violating our OData protocol. This policy is not associated with anything, so it's not doing anything, which is also the reason why we got the errors in the first place. So what we can do now is we can go to the overview. Well, no, we can say associate application gateways. I'm going to add an association to not to the entire application gateway, but to a specific path. And that's the reason why we had that different path definition for OData. So I'm going to go to my route path. This is my application gateway. This is my listener. And my routing rule is going to be /SAP OPU OData. Okay, like this. I'm going to add and associate that. Now we can save this.
And now the assumption is our red list got a little smaller.
Yes. Probably not entirely cleaned up, but it was a matter of explaining the principles and making sure people understood how they could go about this.
Cool.
So let's wait until this got saved. Any questions meanwhile?
No, I think these SAP specific rules that you just created, the one, for example, for data, do you also have them on GitHub somewhere where someone, again, I guess this is relevant for all customers that expose their Fiori services to the internet. So I guess everyone would need to go through the list and disable the different policies.
Yeah. To be honest, we just went through the small set of rules that we needed to make a point in this demo. But if somebody does the effort going through all of them and they would publish that out or document that, that would be tremendously helpful. I know for some vendors do that for their own products. Yeah, and given that a lot of these rules are being used by different vendors, it would make a ton of sense, Holger. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
I'm fully with you.
Something for you then, Robert.
Expertise on both SAP as well as on the security side, as well as the Azure side. So,
yeah.
Something for you then, Robert. You said the partners are interested. Then something for them to create, maybe.
Let's do this again. Refresh our browser.
Drum roll again.
Drum roll again. The CSS errors, we knew it's a misconfiguration on the SAP side. So that's the WebSockets one we can ignore for now. But hopefully we get a valid request. Look at this. The GET request to OPU/OData. That is working. That was the one here.
The post is one too. Yeah.
Yep.
Cool. So the OData calls went through. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Lucky. Friday afternoon, I can still maintain my business partners.
My pleasure, Martin.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, and I guess, I mean, now, as you said, you could spend much more time to really go through all the issues, use your workbooks to really identify and drill down remaining issues, and follow the same process as you outlined right now. Cool.
Yeah, effectively. So choose my host, choose my URL, choose a request example, and then just go through and see what rules got violated. So it's an iterative process. It will take time. It's not painless, but at least this should make it a ton easier.
But Christoph, there's the lazy method, right? Where you could say, I want to just capture for a certain time frame, and I'm going to say every request that I captured for this time frame, I'm going to say it's valid. there is a certain risk if you do that, because you could have had an attack in between.
Absolutely, yeah. So I, if possible, and that's what I recommend to my customers, like turn all of the logging on during testing already, make sure all of that is valid traffic. And then you can be pretty sure that the requests you're seeing were not an active attack. There is a risk, if you don't think this through, that if somebody did an actual attack and you're going to base your rule tuning based upon that, that's probably not a good idea. The other approach could be that you're going to filter by the source IP range, because you're going to trust traffic coming from a given IP range. So I think there's various ways to tackle this, but it's a good call out. You need to be careful based upon which source data you are.
And that's why we have those both modes, right? There's prevention and there's detection mode, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we.
If you put it in detection, it's not going to actually block requests. It's just going to flag them. So you could do the tuning even before you put it on prevention. Only put it in prevention if you're 100% comfortable that you did the tuning and nobody's going to be affected. Yeah.
Great.
Right. That was it from my side. Hopefully that was helpful.
Thank you, Christof. I have to admit, I really loved it, and especially how you explained it, really starting from scratch and going into taking a look at the full logs and then narrowing it down, then switching over to your workbooks that you have prepared. So for me, it was really, really extremely educational. Thank you. It was really great.
I think it's just showing the power of how Martin mentioned partner. How partner like managed service provider can really leverage infrastructure, and this log analytics is a very good example to really go deeper and analyze, okay, what is the issue in this case with application gateway? Yeah, and this is a power. I think from experience, what I have, it's partner are not yet so deep using that functionality what we have. It's amazing, from my personal side, I know that you can do something like this, but I never face such a good example like you did. It's amazing. It's very good. Nice.
It's a good remark. We did not use any technologies that are not available to the wide public, right?
Exactly.
Workbooks is standard technology. Who-sto queries and log analytics is standard technology. It's just putting things all of them together.
Yeah. And you just need a web browser, so to say. Of course, a little bit SQL kind of query
SAP system in background.
Yeah, well, of course. Yeah.
That's nice. Very nice.
Cool.
Awesome.
Cool. Great. Then, thank you, both of you, Christof, Martin, for the great presentation and really this beautiful introduction to the topic. I have to admit that I wasn't familiar with all of this, so thank you very much. With this, I think we're done for today. Thanks for joining, and I'm sure we'll have you again on the show.
Cheers.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.